Hi folks, I'm Jem, the Crazy Pigeon Lady, and welcome back to another one of my videos. This is part 3 in the series about young pigeon development with young Spencer here. So here at the Crazy Pigeon Lady, it's our mission to entertain, educate, inspire people with all things pigeon and dove. In my last 2 videos with Spencer, I talked a little bit about his development and how you can recognise a baby pigeon within a flock. Talked about some of the features that you can use to recognise him. And in the second video, I talked about how he developed since the first video and highlighted some of the changes. This video will be the last video that I make with Spencer and talk about how he'll transition from young pigeonhood into adulthood. This is a bit of a sad moment as well as a happy moment. This is going to be the last video I make with Spencer. He's actually being adopted tomorrow and he's going to go with a lovely new home, and I've really enjoyed fostering him. It's my first time having a young bird to look after, and certainly my first time having a feral pigeon to look after. I actually keep fancy pigeons, so it's been a different experience but very rewarding, and he's grown, as you can see, into quite a feisty young man, and I'm glad he's going to be going to a fantastic home where he's going to get to live outside in a lovely aviary with a flock of other birds, which will really give him a really nice rich experience and a place to belong. So I wish him the very, very best of luck with that. So let's talk a little bit about Spencer. What I haven't covered in my earlier videos is Spencer's story and how he came to me in the first place. So Spencer is a rescue bird. He came from my local town centre. And he, at the age of probably about 2 weeks to maybe 18 days, certainly still quite young, he and another baby pigeon, most likely his sibling, so his brother or sister, actually fell or possibly were taken or knocked from their nest in the town centre, and they were actually being subject to being kicked about by some rather unpleasant people. And this speaks to a real problem that feral pigeons have with persecution, which is that the species, there's lots of misconceptions about feral pigeons, that they're dirty and that they're full of disease, and there isn't a huge amount of value placed on their lives, and so they're very often subject to human abuse. And unfortunately, Spencer was subjected to that. Very, very sadly, that other baby pigeon didn't make it and died of its injuries, but a very kind person actually rescued Spencer and took him to a vet's where he received treatment. That vet's then passed Spencer to me, and so I've been fostering him to bring him into adulthood, build up his strength and his weight, and to get him ready for adult life. So that's what he's been doing while he's been with me, with a view to finding him a permanent home in a more suitable environment than I can offer him here. So I'm very pleased to say that we found that, and he'll be going to them tomorrow. So let's talk about some of the changes that there's been in Spencer since the last video. So in the last video I talked about the fact that Spencer had begun his molt. So he had started to molt some of his body feathers, and that were being replaced with the coloured feathers. So his shiny purple and glossy green feathers, and that is a process that's still going on at the moment. Difficult to tell in the light here, but you might be able to see some colours there on his neck, some purple and some green. You can see a bit of green here, and that is a process that will continue. He's by no means got his full colours yet. So there's still a little bit more of that to go, and he's molting more and more small body feathers every day, as well as molting the feathers on his head and neck to get his colours. He's also molting through a lot of these checkered feathers on the wing. So when the young pigeons, their first set of feathers actually have a slight brownish tint to them and pale edges on the fringes, these won't be their permanent feathers that they keep into adulthood. They will molt through and change all of these. So as well as getting the colours, they'll molt through all of the body feathers as well, and they'll become that rich blue-grey colour that you expect to see of an adult bird. There is a part of the molt that Spencer hasn't begun yet, and that is the molt through the wing and the tail feathers. So all feral pigeons, all domestic pigeons, go through an annual molt. towards the end of the summer, including young birds that were born that year, and they replace all of their primary wing, a good number of their secondary wing, and all of their tail feathers. That Spencer hasn't started that process yet. It's a little bit early yet. We're only in June here in the UK, but we can expect that to have occurred by the end of the summer. And so that's something he'll do at his new home. He will molt through those wing and tail feathers. It's especially important for him to replace those tail feathers because two of them in the centre of his tail, which you won't be able to see very well here, were actually damaged in the process of him falling from the nest. And whilst he can still fly, those feathers can't repair themselves. And so it is necessary for them to be replaced through the molting process. So that's something that I will expect to happen. Not a lot of additional growth has happened with Spencer, so he's about 300 grams now, and he came to us about 250 grams, and once he reached around the 300 mark, his weight had become quite stable, and it's very possible that that might be it for Spencer now. He might not gain a lot more weight. Feral pigeons are generally small birds, unlike some of the fancy breeds that are out there that are quite small birds, and so 300 grams is not an atypical weight for a feral pigeon. You can get them much larger, particularly if they've got racing pigeon blood within them. Racing pigeons tend to be bigger, more muscular and heavier, and so if the feral's got some racing in their blood, they'll be larger birds, but generally he's a good size and a good weight for a feral, so he may not grow much more, but what he lacks in size and weight he certainly makes up for in attitude. As you can see, he's biting my hand furiously, so which brings me quite nicely onto behaviour. So I mentioned in the last video how Spencer will be in this process of trying to understand where he fits in the pecking order. Domestic pigeons, feral pigeons are social birds, so it's very important that these birds understand where they fit in the flock, and it's part of their learning. And as a young bird, typically Spencer would be lower down in the pecking order, certainly before the adult hens and certainly before the adult cocks, and the most dominant amongst them, who would dominate lower status birds in order for access to food and the best nesting sites. So Spencer could reasonably expect to get pecked quite a lot by larger adults, and be bullied out of the way for access to the food. However, here in a home environment, he's got me, and I don't peck him, so he's sort of learned that I'm kind of a soft touch, and therefore he is quite dominant in his behaviour towards me, and so he does a lot of biting and a lot of pecking, and that's not unusual. If you keep what is essentially a hormonal teenage bird, which is kind of where he is right now, that's not unusual for them to get quite bitey, and it's all part of this process of them understanding where they fit in the social order. Also, my other two birds, fancy pigeons, are very placid and laid back in temperament, and therefore his natural tendency is to be more dominant than them, and so he's sort of learned here that he's kind of king of the hill, really, when compared to me and the other birds. And I'm sure when he goes to his new aviary home and integrates with the new flock, he'll have to go through that process again of establishing whether he's going to be a top bird or whether he's going to be lower down the pecking order, and I'm sure those other birds will let him know. And in fact, when you introduce any new bird into the flock, there is this kind of process where the social order needs to re-establish itself, so that everybody then understands where they fit. So Spencer's going to have a lot of learning to do when he gets to his new flock to understand where he's going to fit. But certainly in terms of his development, he has got that assertiveness, he has got that dominance, he's testing those boundaries, and he's going to be learning his place. Also, he's starting to develop some of the behaviours towards sexual maturity. So one of my fancy birds is certainly a hen, and that has not escaped Spencer's notice. So he does a lot of displaying to her, and he'll do the typical displaying behaviour that we've probably all seen in our towns and cities. So he'll puff up his neck, he'll make this noise, which is what I call it, the gobbling coo, but it's the display coo, and it means one of two things. It's either an aggressive display, look at me, I'm a big, powerful, dominant bird, or it's a courtship display. Look at me, I'm big and strong and got good genes and will make a good father to your chicks. So he's doing a lot of that at the moment. He's learning that displaying behaviour. So he's doing the puffing, he's doing the strutting, he's doing the turning in circles towards the hen, because he's trying to express himself as a young potentially breeding male, and trying to get her interested in him. You'll get them off eventually, Spence. I think he won't be happy till my fingers are actually gone. So he's kind of going through a period of pigeon puberty at the moment. He's very full of hormones. He knows what he wants to do. He knows he wants to assert his dominance. He knows he wants to get himself a female. And so he's doing all of those behaviours, but together with those behaviours which are driven instinctually, there's also a certain amount of naivety as well, in terms of he's doing these things, but I'm not sure he quite understands why he's doing them yet, or exactly what they need to lead to. So that is something that will come with time as he matures, and hopefully as he settles down and becomes more mature, he'll have less of a need to sort of really strongly assert himself, and he'll calm down a little bit when he becomes a bit more of a grown-up. But in that respect, he's kind of no different to young humans, really. Very full of energy and life, and wanting to try things and take risks and understand their place. So he's still growing up, but he's doing very well and he's very healthy. And I hope that in his new home, he'll give a lot of joy and a lot of happiness to his new mum, shall we say. So there we go. That is the final part in my series about young pigeon development. Spencer here is on the verge of adulthood, and he's starting to do all of those things that he needs to do to assert his place in pigeon society and establish himself as a young male and potentially a breeding bird. And he'll continue to do that and settle down in time. I hope you've enjoyed Spencer. He's been a great addition to many of my videos, and has sat with me and been such a good boy through them all. I'm going to miss him a lot. I've really enjoyed fostering him. I've really enjoyed the fun of watching him grow and develop as a young man. And in a way it's sad that I won't get to see that full to its true conclusion, but I'm happy that he's going to a good place. That would be good for him. So there you go, from me, from Spencer. Bye bye.